and it's a kind of a relationship I built up while they were my students. I retired 5 years back from here, so it's a matter of 6-7 years when I was teaching them, that I still am in contact with them. And from students, slowly they have grown into my friends, and I'm thankful to them for having called me here, but I would also like to thank Dumsa. A word about that. Whenever I have been speaking in a gathering which is organized by a Muslim or a Dalit, I have always been telling them that although there is a great deal of difference in the living condition, beliefs, etc. of the Dalits and Muslims and Adivasis, I have been always telling them it is very important that Muslims should not only fight the Muslim battle and the Dalit should not fight only the Dalit battle, they should fight the battle of all who are excluded. And if you look at it, the excluded people in this country are the Dalits, the Adivasis, the Muslims, not the OBCs. So I think it is a very important thing that the excluded communities, excluded groups come together into an agitational move to radicalize the Indian democracy. And the most important thing today in the age of globalization is to radicalize democracy. And I think a forum like this, it seems to me, is a very important step in that kind of a direction. Now, having thanked them, I would like to make two preliminary comments which has got to do with Shafiq and others. I would like to make one point here. When I was your age, as a student in a university, what is it that the Muslim problem used to be centered around? It was the question of Urdu, protection of Urdu. It was the question of the minority status of the Aligarh University. And the third question, which exhausted the Muslim politics then, was the question of Muslim personal law. You would notice today that all of these three issues have disappeared. I'm not saying they were unimportant. The point, this is a pointer to something which has happened within what you call the Muslim community. I do not think the Muslim community was ever as confident as it is today. The insecurity was a part of the life then. There is an insecurity among Muslims because Gujarat does happen. Narendra Modi gets away. Things of that kind. Advani is still there, who within his Rath Yatra created a chain of massacre all over India, who becomes a home minister. So the insecurity will have to be there. In spite of all of that, I would like to argue that Muslims have never been as confident as he is today. You look at the politics of the Muslim. The Muslim today is not talking, he's not talking of personal law. I have never heard anybody talk of Aligarh University over the last 15 years. What he's talking about are questions of everyday life. What are the questions of everyday life? These are the questions of your livelihood. This is the question of your employment. This is the question of your shelter. These are the questions which is something very important for Muslim as it is important for other oppressed groups in the society. The Dalit politics, apart from the question of the untouchability, which is something very central to the Dalit politics, is also talking of these things. The tribal politics of talking of these things. In other words, the centrality of the everyday life, issues of everyday life, is a very important indicator of one thing in any politics anywhere in the world. That is, it is a secularization of the politics. So Indian Muslim today, although there may not be a compact, although there may not be a formal unity, Muslims today, in terms of the debates that are going on, is as much a part as any other Indian of the issues which concern the common, ordinary, exploited, oppressed, poor people of this country. Now, by which I am not meaning to say Muslim is necessarily completely exploited. Now, one thing which we must realize, and which I have made a point to point out something. Muslims is a very different kind of a community in India. In fact, if you look at statistically, the most excluded people The most discriminated people after the Dalits in Indian society, statistics will tell you, are Muslims. In terms of job, in terms of education, in terms of entitlement, in terms of what the government and the society provides for. They are the most excluded people after the Dalits, much more than OBCs. Nevertheless, the fact is important. There is no other community in the world, like oppressed community, like the Muslim community. It is the only oppressed community anywhere in the world which has a stratum of highly accomplished people. You won't have it among Dalits and the tribals. You have people from the great painters, the great musicians, the great artists, the great intellectuals. You will have a large number of Muslims among them. In other words, there is a stratum among Muslims who is as accomplished, as vocal, and as important anybody else. Now, what I want to argue here, before I come to Babri Masjid, which is a matter I am not really sure what to speak about, but what I am more interested in, such a community cannot be a marginalized community as Shafiq is talking about. There are a large number of Muslims living on the margin, but Muslims are not a marginalized community. In fact, what I would further argue, in a stronger case, that in a democracy, people can be on margin. But in a democracy, so long as there is freedom of speech and the habeas corpus, so long as you have got these provisions, no community can be marginalized. The fact that the whole idea of a margin is drawn from a text, the text speech, the margin is empty, the margin can't say anything. What you do, you can fill up the margin in the way that you like to do with the margin. In a democracy, when people are in struggle, when people are in fight, when people are in contestation, the Muslim is, the Dalit is, the tribal is, the women are. If they are all on the struggle and they are all fighting, then none of them can be called marginalized, although they are on margins, because democracy opens up a space where you acquire agency. You become a fighter for the making of your own history. That is something which I think is the strength of Indian democracy. It is full of hundreds of infirmities, full of hundreds of untidy features, everything. But this is its strength. And this is what I think has given the confidence to the Muslim, to the other excluded communities to stand up and fight. Now, therefore today, if you look at it, the reaction of the Muslim to the Babri Masjid judgment of the court is very different than what it was in the 1990s, when the whole controversy called Babri Masjid emerged, or Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi dispute emerged, and people fought around it. India got polarized on the issue. The Hindutva forces, the secular forces, the Muslim forces. It was a kind of a polarization which has never come about in Indian politics like it happened in the 80s and the early 90s. Nevertheless, that has disappeared. That again is a reason of the working of the dynamics of democracy, within which people have taken to other forms of struggle, much more important, much more intimately concerned with their life and all that. Now, it is in this context I want to say very little about the Ayodhya judgment. I want to make a very clear point. People are saying, I do not know what to say about it. I was sitting alone when the judgment was coming on the TV. I was watching it. My first reaction was, which is what I am going to talk to you. It is a Hindutva judgment. The High Court judgment of the Allahabad is a pure Hindutva judgment. And I'll try to argue that. You remember in 1993, when the government referred the matter to the Supreme Court, it refused to entertain the case, saying that we have no competence to decide on these matters. So it sent back the case to the government. This time when the case was in Allahabad High Court, the matter was again taken to Supreme Court by a public interest litigation. The Supreme Court didn't stop it. It said one thing which is very important. So long as it is a case about the title to the land, let the case go on. That is, in other words, the judgment was to be about who has the title to this land. does this title to the land belong to the Sunni Waqf Board, which owned the mosque, or is it something else? The judgment says what? It doesn't say anything about that. The dispute in front of the court, the judgment is silent. It says 1/3 of the land will go to the Muslims, 1/3 will go to the Akhada, and 1/3 will go to the Hindus. Now, what kind of a judgment is it? It is not a judgment at all. It is an arbitration. You don't need a court for that. So, firstly, it is not a judgment. Number two, which is very important, 2 of the 3 judges conceded to the fact that Ram was born there. History has been determining, except for the fact that Ram was born in Ayodhya. 3,000, 4,000, how many thousand years back? Because Indian as a people do not have a strong chronological sense of recording the dates till very recent times. So we know that Upanishads were written. We know that Puranas are there, but we have never put a date to that. We know that it was around a certain time. So you can dispute. You can say it was 2,500 years back. Somebody can say, no, it was 3,000 years back. Nobody has a clear evidence.